Excellent, 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 excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can get you to take your seats, that'd be fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, as we have out there, there's still plenty of food. It is a working lunch style. So if you want some sandwiches or a drink or things like that, quickly do it now. We're doing some housekeeping and all that. We're letting people know what's happening. So you've got a bit of time to grab those sort of things if you want to now. And we welcome a whole range of people also online as well, as we're doing this as a webinar for our customers. So there's people in Queensland, South Australia, New South Wales, and even some people in Victoria who couldn't make it here physically are actually online as well. So this is something that's very exciting for us. This is our Packaging and Sustainability Conference, which we're doing in conjunction with APCO. And we're very excited about this. It's all about how can we as an organisation and as an industry work towards the future of packaging. What does that actually even mean? And all those sort of things. And we'll get into a bit of that. But that's what we want to do. It's a whole solution-based conference. But also, so the way to do this is we're going into the modern world, is we're using a system called Menti. Now, some of you might have already been at conferences that have done this. There are QR codes on your tables. For people online, there is QR code here. With your camera, you can even zoom into the one that's on the screen. All you do is go to your camera, point it up to the screen, and then grab it, and we can all go online. Now, what does that do? It straight away takes you to an app. And at the moment, you'll have the first page there. Should all have their instructions, is what you should all have. And later on, this is going to be interactive. So on your phone, the actual screen will change as we change. So as we go to the next slide, you should all have the agenda on there at the moment. And so that's going to just go along as a pace. We actually get to some interactive bits later on. And that's one of the things that we wanted this to be, is an interactive process. So we're going to get to some questions. We're going to get to how do we actually give feedback to government. We're going to, even at the end, as you should have always with a conference, we're going to have a survey of how we did or didn't do. It's all going to be done through this Menti process. And it's allow people who are online to actually doing the same as us. So when we actually get to some questions and answers later on, people are going to be able to do it. We're all going to do it together. And so it just makes it so that we're all in one group and doing one conference. So that's the rough agenda. A lot of people already got this, especially online. We've already seen this, and we'll go through that today. So we've got the welcome here, which is what I'm doing. So it is welcome. We will have four main speakers. You've got myself, you've got Gaffney over here, who's our sales and marketing manager. You've got Ian Hayes, who is from APCO, our sustainability packaging strategist. And you've got Sandra Maso over here, who's head of packaging transformation. So we're going to sort of be the main panelists, but we've got other people as well that we've asked to come up and talk as well. So you're not listening to my voice or to Roz's voice the whole time.
How are we doing this conference, Louis?
Well, as this slide's busy. It's complex. There's lots of things there, and there's where can you get the help? Who's in charge? What's happening? What happens if you don't? It's busy. It's actually complex. It would be so easy actually just to try and not do anything because it is hard or potentially hard. So in one way, we were talking to some customers, and they were basically saying how hard it was or how they didn't know the information. So as a group, we basically decided back in June, well, how can we get the information across to our customers? And then can we actually partner with someone who actually really knows this stuff? So here we've got, which is why we reached out to APCO. And APCO was very interested in actually being involved in this conversation. They're just as interested in actually getting out there and talking about, well, where are we going, why we're doing it, and what do we need to take back to government? So that's what actually drove this conference, the idea behind it. And it's grown in size. Originally, it was just going to be small, but it's actually grown in size. So we really believe in this. We believe in the concept of sustainability and about what we can do to improve the packaging landscape. And so we're really interested in actually doing this. And we hope that through this conference that everyone actually gets enthused as well about what we can be doing.
And one of the things that I found being at the coalface with customers, the information is fragmented. Some people know a lot, some people know a little, some people have a medium range, some people have got the wrong end of the stick. So we've decided to try and pull together the people who have the information to be able to pass this on to customers, which is why we get all of these sort of questions as we operate in a data. So our focus here is on flexible packaging, soft plastics. Now, obviously, the APCO are looking at compliance for all packaging, and some of what they say today will relate to anything outside of soft plastics. But our focus is soft plastics, that's what we manufacture. So we will be presenting the latest sustainability packaging compliance requirements. What do you need to do? What have you done? What are you doing? What needs to be done? What is your business alignment in order to get you to where you need to be compliant? And you will start to see about some of the regulations that are coming through and things that you will need to do. So where are your businesses at? Are you up to speed? Do you think you're up to speed? Do you know if you're up to speed? And then we're going to have a look at some solutions, because this is a constantly evolving environment. And as Louis said, we may not be presenting answers to you today. What we're looking at is a pathway to assist you to get to those solutions, because for every customer, it will be different. Depending on what your packaging requirements are, it will be different, but there will still be the end goal of compliance. So there's three major packaging sustainability pillars that we've been dealing with. One is recycle ready. So is your material compliant with the recommended guidelines? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that your material is recyclable here and now today. It means that you have got compliant material according to the guidelines. And we're all very aware of the red cycle process that is no longer in existence. That was the end goal for a lot of the final disposal by the consumer, but that was the thing that was probably in consumers' minds. If it could go into red cycle, it was recycle ready. So then the next pillar for all packaging is curbside collection, material that meets any collection that a council can pick up on your weekly garbage collection basis. This material is considered recyclable. Now, in soft plastics, we don't have a lot of options for curbside collection, but who knows, that may change in the future. At the moment, our biggest option would be paper. And then there's compostable, whether it's home compostable or industrial. So the three pillars: recycle ready, curbside collection, and compostable. And compostable is where the material is rated to be home or industrial compostable, and including certification. There is certification that is being created within Australia that suits the Australian environment. It is currently suitable for curbside collection only in South Australia. So this is very fragmented from a government perspective as well. So whether it's local, state or federal, there's still a lot of alignment that needs to occur. So these are the three main pillars that impact our packaging today. Underpinning this is whether or not there is recycled material content within the packaging you are using. Post-industrial recycled content or post-consumer. Now, post-industrial is probably an easier get because that's something that our suppliers can handle, and we'll hear a bit more about that today. But post-consumer has a lot more work that needs to be done to ensure that it is compatible and able to be used going down the track. It's probably better overseas at the moment than it is in Australia, but there is a lot of businesses that are starting, one in particular that's starting to work towards taking our soft plastics and bringing it back to the base of crude oil in order to turn it into resin again. But it is not ready for commercial use at this stage. So this whole scene of sustainable packaging is evolving. It is busy. It has a lot of information in it to absorb, and you need to work out what suits your business and who can help you. And that's why we're here today, to be able to say to you, we are here to help you with that. And how does this work? Because we all need to understand it. As a packaging supplier, we need to understand it in order to be able to get you to your end goal. I saw a face come up on my screen. So here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Foley, CEO of the APCO.
Thank you. I might just share my screen. While I'm doing that, oh, I can't share my screen. Are you able to enable me to share my screen?
Yes.
While that's happening, certainly thank you for the opportunity. There's actually a lot to talk through. I'll just wait. While that's happening, while I'm being given permission, I just wanted to sort of help frame up. I've been in the role of CEO for circa 18 months. And prior to that, I was nine or so years in retail, where I had a remit across a couple of Wesfarmers businesses, including Kmart and Target and APCO, and an online store called Catch of the Day. My remit included packaging, and I've got to say that over the last circa 10, 12 years, I don't think there's been a time in history when packaging's been more relevant, more topical, more scary, but equally more exciting. And certainly the conversation I want to have with you today and the slides that I'll walk you through, if I get to, just take you on a bit of our journey around that. And just a second, here we go. Where are we? What I'm wanting to do is, can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Fabulous. So there's never been a time where packaging's been more topical, more attention. And certainly for APCO, on the one hand, that's really scary. And for some in the packaging sector, that's really scary. But in reality, it is actually really exciting. I think now's the time, certainly with what's happening in and around reform, we have to lean into it and help. For the context, the covenant that APCO sits under, the Australian Packaging Covenant, the covenant is circa 24, 25 years old, and clearly was done at a time where things like circular economy, plastic, no big deal, no issue. The game's fundamentally changed. So that means APCO certainly has to change. And with that in mind, the way we're approaching the task at hand and the preparation for a stronger regulatory model that is coming is under what we call a two-horizon strategy. First horizon, Horizon 1, is really today through till December 25. That's the period for the current national packaging targets that were set in 2018. They were set as voluntary. And while we're doing that, we also need to then lean into what's actually happening beyond. On behalf of our members, we owe it to our 2,500 odd members, including many of you, in fact, probably, hopefully most of you in the room. We owe it to industry and to, you could argue, to government and the environment to be leaning in as, given our position and visibility of this space. So we're certainly positioning around and preparing for and helping government navigate their way through what stronger regulation means, because that is what's happening. So I'm now going to just take on a bit of a journey, one touching on what we call Horizon 1 and then 2 beyond, basically from 2026 further. Really happy to take questions at the end, which is probably the easiest way to do it. And I've got to say from the get-go, I do apologise for not being able to attend in person. I think credit to the J&P Flexographic team for hosting, putting this on. It's awesome. And the opportunity for me to speak is really appreciated. So coming back to the national packaging targets, soon after I arrived, we did a deep review of the national packaging targets, and these are the 4 key findings here that, yes, they're driving transformation in packaging, and a lot of you have all done a lot of work, but the results aren't equal across the system, and clearly there are some significant gaps in play that are occurring, and we're not going to meet all the targets. Obviously, there are some key call-out numbers there around where we're at versus where we need to be. Particularly, there's a big gap around 70% of plastic packaging recycled or composted. The second key finding was that post-2025 vision is needed to guide action moving forward. We have to set the North Star, and that's a conversation almost on a daily basis with government, because folks like you need to have investment certainty, massive costs, massive implications for your business models. What you can and can't use around packaging it's integral to a lot of businesses, the way you work. We also, one of the other findings was that there's a significant need for strengthened collaboration across the entire system. You can see down in that bottom left corner that the grey space is really the current regulatory model of focus for APCO as a co-regulator. It's only in a small section of you could argue, the value chain. And we're trying within the frame of the responsibilities and the remit that we have from government and our members, trying to influence voluntary targets that in reality is obviously very challenging because they're voluntary, and you can't actually have a touch point across all the areas, particularly when it comes to the waste collection system and or the sorting system through material recovery facilities and beyond. The other key finding was that material-specific interventions are needed. As far as what we're doing about these 4 findings, we've developed a playbook that's prioritised in and around to deliver some really key strategic outcomes with system-wide impact. We've strengthened our ability to deliver programs, and a couple of our team are obviously with you at the moment from our packaging transformation team. That didn't exist 12 months ago, neither did our systems transformation team. So we've used these insights and results to really drive into what's needed for the task at hand. And then there's also overlaying all of the above is we're strengthening our engagement and capability across the system, and we're trying to now work through more effectively how we reach into other parts of the system to take them on our journey. What that actually means in tangible results and how we're looking to really accelerate through till 2025, you could argue that there are 3 key headlines. Obviously, a lot more detail sits behind, but the key headlines are really accelerating improvements in design, which impact circa 480,000 tonnes of packaging. That's really talking about closing the gap on packaging that is recyclable, reusable, or compostable. Beyond that, we're also driving a program in and around, or programs in and around B2B recycling. Historically, that hadn't been, B2B supply chain hadn't really been a focus for APCO, but we know that there's circa 90,000 tonnes of flexible LDPE and close to 750,000 tonnes of corrugated cardboard in supply chains, the back of warehouses, the back of shops. Most of it hasn't actually seen a customer. And to put that 740,000 tonnes of cardboard in context, that's almost as much plastic packaging that enters the Australian market. So again, there's some big numbers at play here. And then the final piece down the bottom there is really fast tracking a system that supports a collection and end market demand for household soft plastics. That's aimed at impacting circa 340,000 tonnes of material. Obviously, post the red cycle scenario that played out late 2022, there's a lot of work still to be done. You've got the Supermarkets Plastics Task Force. You've got some great work being led by the Australian Food and Grocery Council through the National Plastics Recycling Scheme. It's now a case of how together these activities need to really land and drive significant uplift. Part of that, you could argue that in the grand scheme of things, the numbers and the ability to move the dial in that space, it's going to be a slow, not a slow burn. It's going to be a slow journey because of where Australia is at as far as domestic ability to actually genuinely recycle in the market for, in the first instance, mechanically recycled soft plastics. But we have to do it. The community expectation, the community sentiment around soft plastics is obviously profound, and the impact that closure has had, or the Red Cycle program has had on community confidence, we can never let that happen again. And there are some learnings and some work in the background that APCO's certainly been leaning into to make sure that doesn't happen again. But the task at hand is, how do we actually, as a system, come together to reactivate? But before that happens, we need to obviously have the processing capacity in the end markets, given there are bans on waste exports. So moving forward, preparing for Horizon 2. There's a whole lot of questions that I've got on the screen up here, just in and around the journey and some of the thought processes we've been going through. So what does a regulatory framework need to achieve? So these questions are things that we've been asking ourselves and our members. What principles should guide the development implementation? What will the administrator need to do, and what capabilities will it need to ensure success? Moving forward, the environment ministers have certainly, now whether they were listening to us, they've obviously been going on a journey in their own right. But there are significant changes now coming through, and in terms like, is it a co-regulator or an administrator? You could argue at the moment, use those terms interchangeably, but what future role, what capabilities would be needed for an organisation like APCO, or it may be another organisation in the future? What regulatory tools are needed to ensure its success? And that's a really challenging piece. And there are lots of learnings and reflection that we've gone on, particularly off the back of the National Packaging Target Review. Why haven't things moved as quickly as they could or should? And that's awkward and challenging when I'm looking at APCO's toolkit and ability to actually drive change or require organisations to do something. And the reality is, under the current regulatory framework, there's actually not a lot that you can actually do, apart from convene the system and try to provide best practice solutions and tools and resources and assets like some of the team that are with you today. The other piece then is, what are the implications and opportunities for brand owners and stakeholders, and what do they need to do to prepare? There's a big change management process that's needed to support regulatory reform, which we believe APCO certainly has to play a lead role in. So to develop our position on reform, what we actually did last year, and some of you I'm sure were involved in the process, we did a national roadshow, plus we did a number of, you could argue, deep conversations, in-depth conversations with a number of stakeholders across the system. The headlines coming out of that, most of which we've actually then taken into our conversations with government, who have, to government's credit, they've been really, really keen to understand and to listen to these insights. And certainly the dynamic in the relationship is very respectful and trust. There's a lot of trust that's been built in the last 18 months in this space between APCO and government, which is really timely and critical. They genuinely want to get this right, and we genuinely want to help them do that on members' behalf. So the first headline outcome from our engagement, circa 800 members through the roadshows in major capital cities. There's a 85% support for a single system scheme administrator. The concept being that you would have a federal government entity coordinating centrally things like the definition of what are packaging standards, setting thresholds for, say, recycled content, and or defining what the national packaging targets are and mandating them. But underneath that central government entity, there needs to be a single scheme administrator. And of course, at the right time, APCO would be looking to put its hand up and go through whatever the process is to nominate. The administrator, there was 82% support for that administrator being independent of government. There's 78% support for governments retaining enforcement powers. And I think that was a really interesting one. In these roadshow forums, there was a lot of debate and discussion in some of the forums in and around these issues. And certainly my preference as a CEO of APCO is that APCO in its current shape and form as a co-regulator, or potentially in the new form of a system administrator, is that enforcement has to be done by government, and assume that there will be a new federal EPA at some point, then that would be perfectly positioned to represent all governments of Australia and actually hold the system to account. That entity, that government agency, if all goes well, would actually support the administrator, who would work very collaboratively with industry to take them on the journey, to provide support, but also to ensure compliance. That's different, though, from enforcement. So if a member wasn't compliant, you would go through a really structured, transparent process, and after 3 strikes or whatever it may be agreed and very transparently, you'd then be passed over to the government, who would then do the enforcing. You can't be good cop and bad cop all at the same time. My view is that we are here to help take industry on the journey and be a bridge between industry and government. But actually, when it comes to enforcement, that has to be done through government. There's clearly significant support from members for other ESG elements in the design rules, particularly around things like greenhouse gas. There's also support for mandatory EPR schemes to drive collection. That's 84% are just saying, listen, just make it easy, but it's all in. So if we're using soft plastic, or if we're using rigid plastic, or whatever it might be, mandate it, but it's got to be for everybody, and then back it in with support. There was also strong support for recycled content targets, again, just making it really clear, but having those mandated. So coming out of the roadshows, there are 3 key areas that are obviously now being positioned. And actually, before I talk about that, what I might just do is that this work here helped us position some really key messages on behalf of membership to government. The environment ministers then met in November, and at their November meeting, they concluded these were some of the key headlines that came out of that. That the federal government will be essentially a central regulator. There will be mandated packaging design standards. There will be minimum recycled content requirements. They'll also be looking at harmful chemicals in packaging. We're certainly anticipating the appointment of a scheme administrator to oversee the implementation, as I've already been discussing. And the ministers have also endorsed a national traceability standard for recycled materials. Now, work within government is happening across all of those. We're certainly intimately involved in all of those issues. And again, there's certainly a really collaborative mindset in the work that we're doing with government, but they're also consulting across the system, which is great to see. So moving forward, what we're now looking at is, and we're really keen to get your involvement in this in coming months, is APCO's 2030 strategy. So the last years, looking backwards, our focus was really on developing a clear and effective position around regulatory reform, whereas now we're really looking at what does it mean now that the environment ministers have come out with their consensus position. So this strategy is going to be out till 2030. It's actually a requirement of the environment ministers. We need to get the document to them by the end of June, and that's part of our covenant obligations. The focus of the document and the strategy is on accelerating progress towards both the national packaging targets at 2025, but also, and more importantly, what does life look like beyond? And this is an amazing opportunity where we're quite genuinely really keen, and I would encourage all of you in the room today to participate and attend one of our forums. So certainly if you're in Melbourne, that's on, from memory, Thursday the 8th of May at 9:30. So as far as next steps go, we are beavering away with our strategy document. That goes to a APCO board workshop in the first week of April. At the same time, we're engaging with a number of government forums to make sure that industry and government are aligned, and that we can then at pace take a draft with some really key questions to industry, to our membership come late April. At the same time, we're working on a transition plan. We're making some assumptions, but we need to be thinking on behalf of industry and government for what does the transition look like. So we're crystal balling, and also what can we do today that can help set us up for success beyond 2025. And I think probably a final call out from me is just that last one, which is that's the time to act. It's amazing that you're all in the room today. And again, I apologise for not being there in person, but it is a case of how can we together work to close the gap on the national packaging targets, but also work together starting today to have a really clear game plan, playbook, call it what you will, for how you'll actually be able to lean in, because there are some really clear things coming through. National packaging standards are going to be mandated. There will be increased requirements for recycled content. There'll also be increased requirements for reporting and traceability. So it's going to be a new game. And to be honest, the sooner industry, the sooner those that are relying on packaging get involved, get into that mindset, you'll be much better placed coming out of, and when government has more clarity around what its position is going to be. I'm just going to stop sharing, and I don't know how much time I've got left, but I'm really happy to take any questions. And hopefully that sort of little compressed sort of summary of where we've come from and what we're currently working on and where it's heading has been helpful, but very happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Chris. If we start from anyone in the room while we've got Chris online, has anyone actually physically in the room here got a question you'd like to direct to Chris? Not a one. Oh, hang on. Blair's got one. Louis, if you take the mic over.
Thanks. Hi, Chris. Blair Hope. You
Blair.
mentioned a number of points, but one that interested me was around mandating design or mandating recycled content.
Yep.
How does that get governed as such when it's a worldwide marketplace we compete with a lot of imported products coming in?
It's a really, really good call. Good question. So one of the overriding principles that we're certainly taking in, and this is where APCO, my role is a rather delicate one around advocacy. Historically, that hadn't been something that APCO saw necessarily going back, say, 2 or 3 years as its role as a co-regulator. But yeah, it's a very different game today to where we were 3 years ago. So we're certainly using that. One of the reasons why we created the packaging transformation team was to be have much greater visibility, we need to be much more informed on the drivers of the accessibility to the price impacts of things like recycled content and packaging formats. We're very much involved in the process that government's driving for around both the development of national standards that build on the existing sustainable packaging guidelines that APCO's had in place for many years. But beyond that, we're also doing a really deep review of recycled content, targets, thresholds, traceability. All of that is framed in and around, and certainly from Minister Tanya Plibersek, she's been really clear that she's very much aware of the need to be internationally aligned. So the intention here isn't that we end up with, and I hope there's nobody on the call from New Zealand, but we end up with a scenario like what's playing out in New Zealand, where there's a gazette that came into effect on February 1. If that was applied here, that would actually see 650,000 tonnes of recyclable material go to landfill because it doesn't meet a defined criteria for curbside. The same could play out if we're not careful with how we align packaging standards and recycled content with international. There are obviously challenges, and that's why we're doing this deep review of what are the implications, what are the scenarios, how could the government position and manage the whole issue around accessibility and also cost impact. This is challenging. I'm not pretending we've got the answers. We've convened a working group that leverages our collective action group, which, as the term indicates, is a representation from across the system. In addition to that team of 17, we've actually brought in, we've handpicked representatives that are really exposed to international markets for their packaging and sourcing, supply chain experts and or polymer experts to help us develop a paper that we will be taking to government. They're really open, they're really keen to receive it. We've got a really tight time frame, and it's very much a live issue for us because we want to be able to actually provide a really clear message on behalf of industry, not give them a problem, actually try to give them a solution. It's easy to sit there and say, oh, it's all too hard and this and that, and if you do this, you'll do that. They get that, they understand that, but they're also saying we have to move forward, and we're having to do that in a global market. So it's a big task, not pretending it's going to be easy and not pretending everybody's going to like the answers. On the upside, government's quite clear. The message we're getting is that when mandates come in, it will impact all. We just need to make sure that they're taking the right messages forward, which is why we've resourced up in that area, particularly around recycled content. So if you've got a position, please reach out. Ian Hayes is obviously there. Give your details to Ian Hayes, and we can certainly try to bring you into some of that review that we're doing at the moment. Any other questions?
Chris, you noted that the timeline was very tight, and you also
Yep.
talked about 2030 guidelines that you're heading towards. But from a mandating perspective, how tight is that timeline?
What's happening is, so government are reviewing what the national packaging targets of the future are going to look like. The current targets expire at the end of 2025. And you've also got what the national packaging standards look like. And you've also got the piece of work around recycled content. So they're sort of the three key elements at play at the moment. We're hoping, hoping that government provides, and this is government's decision, so we can advocate, we can work with our members to take a position to government, but ultimately it's their decision. So respectfully, we are hoping that they will make a decision come November this year, because I've been really open and clear with government saying that industry needs as much time as possible. that runway for you to make changes, and having come from a really complex, big retail business that sources from 2,500 factories in 11 countries, and brings into the country circa 170,000 shipping containers a year of everyday low price merchandise. I get that. That was my world. So those critical paths don't get changed quickly. And it's already, 12 months is not going to be enough. They're very much aware of that. It's more a case of, I'm hoping that by the end of this calendar year, by November, they will be, I'm hoping, positioning some really clear messages. And at the same time, we're working, trying to provide them with pathways as far as what it might mean, who may be impacted in, you could argue, from January 1, 2026. Just because they announce them doesn't mean that it all may come into effect straight away. So I'm not expecting that they're going to make radical, you've got 12 months notice, doesn't matter how hard it is. They're not naive, and they're very aware of the unintended consequences, and the fact that the covenant as it currently stands been around for 24, 25 years. I think the default position, we may find that they have to actually extend BA business as usual for a little bit longer, because there's too much to play for here, and potentially the changes that they're talking about, they will have ramifications that you can't expect business to turn on a dime and change packaging formats, substrates, recycled content, all that. I think that's the call out from me to you, though, is you need to start working through with your suppliers and your packaging designers and your pack tech teams. We know that things are going to change. We know that the recycled content is coming, and the sooner you get into that space, the better. The sooner you're looking at the sustainable packaging guidelines. Do you currently align with those guidelines? They're already in place. So they will be strengthened and built on. They're not going to be thrown away. So are you collecting the data? Where could you source recycled content? Lots of questions that you can actually start to act on today to prepare yourself, because it is coming. And although we don't know the exact time frame, I think there's enough key messages out there to be able to start acting.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. Has anyone else got any questions? Yes, Hayley.
Hayley Norton, is there any view that the government's going to help support industry with any capital layout for new recycling plants or technical needs to be completed?
Look, again, that's really a question for government, and I'm not here to sort of put words in their mouth. I think that they, in many respects, they see a lot of this as industry's opportunity. They see a lot of this as industry's responsibility, and the message, the narrative that came out of the November, or the narrative that's been coming out of the last 3 environment ministers' meetings has been pretty clear. They acknowledge that government has to tidy up the framework, the regulatory settings, but they're also very clear that industry needs to own the problem. And that's where it's complicated, because as businesses in the packaging sector, there's only so much we can control. And that's been a message that I've been giving to government, is that we need a systems solution and it's much more complicated than just mandating recycled content or mandating packaging standards. Because if we don't have the system to support that, we're nowhere. They've really listened to that. They get it. What that means, though, I'm not expecting that they're going to be necessarily throwing money at the problem, and so they would see that that's solving industry's problem. They don't see that that's their role. They'll work on the regulatory settings and the framework to create a new way of working for the packaging system. And it may be that the packaging system, on a positive note, is actually reframed to be much more holistic of the whole value chain that we all rely on, which in reality starts with curbside collections, involves CDS, It also involves the MRFs, it involves, so if we don't have alignment, if we're not having standards that are matched, packaging standards that are matched to MRF standards as an example, it's not that effective. But again, I'm not expecting the government's going to be then saying, hey, we'll write you all these checks to fund the infrastructure. And that's where we need to all get it. And this will be discussed quite in a very detailed way in our 2030 strategy, what that actually means, because the minister's messages are very clear. They are not going to be the checkbook. How does industry then lean into this problem? What levers can we collectively come to that mean that we own the problem? And because if we can't get our head around that, and if we can't work in a different way, government's not going to pull industry out of this situation. And if mandates are in place, they'll want to do those mandates to make it easy and equitable for everybody. But what that does mean, there's going to be new costs, but everybody's going to be in the same boat. So again, that's where the 2030 strategy is super important for both leaning into the balance of the 2025 targets, but also what does life look like after 2025? How can industry take responsibility to lean in? What mechanisms can be used so that industry has a sense of control over its own destiny for packaging? And that's quite different to what we've currently got, where there is no system, there's no approach to how we intersect with particularly the waste recycling infrastructure of Australia. Happy to take any other questions.
And we've got one up the back. Here we go.
Hi, Chris. It's Ivana from Scalzo. You mentioned that there's a transformation team and that they're putting together all the information on behalf of the industry. How are they collecting all that information? Like, are they going out to businesses, to sites, or
is that regarding? So there's a couple of. So we've got a packaging transformation team, essentially full of pack techs, including a couple of folk that are from in the conversation with you today. They're working on particularly the national packaging standards. There's a forum that's convened by the federal government with a number of representatives. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, but I think it might be circa 8 or 10 representatives from across the system. The government have a really tight approach to how they're going to be, when I say having good governance and transparency adhered to, in that they're developing a set of standards that I'm assuming will then be socialised and feedback will be taken before they're then confirmed and locked down. There'll be obviously cost impacts evaluated and calculated for what are the implications of those standards. At the same time, there's work being done around the recycling piece. That's a separate piece of work to the packaging transformation team. It leverages some of the team members, but it's a separate piece of work that we're taking a lead on to develop a position paper that we'll take to government. We're not visiting sites, but we've got representatives from across the system. So there's going to be circa probably 30 organisations represented in that process. So that's where we're at. And if and when and as required, we'll obviously be deep diving and chasing down rabbit holes to get as much information and intelligence as we can to furnish a really strong position that we can take to government.
Just to support that, Chris, Ros Gaffney here from J&P. Some of what you're going to be able to talk about today is going to be feedback to Ian Hayes,
totally.
who's over here, who's actually on the working party with the government. So this forum is allowing you to add your feedback through the process that we're going through this afternoon.
Absolutely.
So
and beyond today.
To that, Chris.
Yeah, exactly. And seriously, for some of you, some of this news might be a little bit of, oh, wow, but that's, again, credit to the J&P team for facilitating, because it is really timely. It is actually really important. Now's the time to start acting on it if you haven't already done so. And there's a lot to play for. So from my point of view, I can see that we're probably at time. Really happy for you to pick up these conversations or these issues with Ian in the room, and or reach out to me directly after today. And yeah, again, thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate your time.
Cheers.
Shall we continue on?
Shall continue on. Okay. So that was Chris. And now we get into a panel discussion. So we actually take some of those points and we have some questions that we've sort of created around some of those points to drive home some of what we've been talking about. So on the panel, we have Ian Hayes, who is now the head of strategy for this packaging transformation. We've got head of transformation, Sandra Maso from APCO again. So again, that team that Chris was talking about, and we've got some other members from APCO who are on that team. So to answer that question, that's how we get some of that feedback. And you can ask the questions as well through here, and also when we get to the breaks as well. And you've got Roz and myself. So Roz, take it over.
So I'll hand over a microphone. You guys can have another one there. So to start off, I had a bit of a look at our overall group of customers, and we've been working with a lot of you and the customers who couldn't attend today to see what your compliance status is and to get you there. So I went through a whole heap of different construction and permutations of our figures, and when I had a look at how many customers were compliant at the moment, about 43% of our overall customer portfolio are 100% compliant. And 57% are not quite. Now, in some instances, they might have one structure on one product that might not be compliant, or they may have more, or they're still working with us to be able to get to compliance. And there could be some hindrances as to how that will happen. But we're not quite there yet, and we really need to move the dial. So what were the key culprits? Well, I'm sure you're all familiar with some of these products. Foil that's not a single web, i.e. that's not a foil lid, for example, like your yogurts, where you can wash up the yogurt and scrunch it up into a ball and put it in your recycle bin. Nylon as a component that is 10% or more of your total structure. Paper with PFAS. Any kind of PET, whether it's plain or metallized, and anything with PVDC, PVDC BOP, matte BOP, nylon, PVDC PET. These are the key culprits that are not making customers 100% compliant at the moment. Now, some of you might be sitting there going, yep, I've already worked through this and we're compliant, but not every customer is, and it's our goal to get everybody there. So we've been working on options being trialled to meet this compliance. But what we need to look at is, will we meet the timeline for the future soft plastic handling processes with regard to compliance? Are we going to get there? Because as you heard Chris saying, things are going to start to really ramp up from 2026. So let's have a look at what that looks like.
Did that get anywhere near what we wanted to talk about? Not really.
Well, also you mentioned that initial responses to the announcement of regulations, you know, how people viewed it, and you said it scared the shit out of you to start with.
Absolutely.
What sort of responses have you had elsewhere? Do people see it as an opportunity or a threat? Now, Sandra has actually come out of fast-moving consumer goods.
Yes, I have.
What were your thoughts?
So whilst I knew about the regulations and the targets, it wasn't really until I got to APCO and really got to understand all the targets and the urgency of the targets that it all started to come together, and the progress we were making within my previous company was probably a little bit slower than what it needed to be. But the thing that I reflect on is, at least at that company, we had started the journey. And I'm aware that there's quite a few companies that actually haven't started the journey. So they would see this as a threat. But it's something, it's coming. We have to deal with it. I think it really, we all need to look at it as an opportunity. We sort of have to take stock of where we are and treat it as an opportunity. Things are going to change in Australia moving forward. So how do we respond to that and be masters of our own destiny? Because government mandates are coming, they will be put in, and if we don't plan for them, we will just have to react to them. So I think where possible, we need to do as much as we can to plan ahead.
So if we look at mandating regulations for practices and strategies for packaging design, have you two got any thoughts about what that looks like? Like if we're going to be told what to do with our packaging design?
Yeah, I'll have a go at that one and see what you think, Sandra. Tell me when I get it wrong. The challenge is, and this is probably something as a 35-year plus packaging technologist, is we should only be using packaging if it's protecting them and looking after our products. So if it's not doing that, then why are we doing it? If it is doing that, then what are the alternatives? And what is that going to do in terms of the protection and the shelf life, et cetera, that I'm going to bring to my packaging or my product? So I've seen some companies make some interesting packaging choices, which they think are more sustainable. And then that's drifted into a 12-month shelf life becoming a 12-day shelf life, et cetera, et cetera. So it needs to be considered. And we should be having those conversations, I think. And Chris mentioned the packaging transformation team. In fact, there's 5 of us in the packaging transformation team and 4 of us are in the room from an APCO point of view. So Viv, stick your hand up. Rebecca are sitting over there. Sandra and myself. And it's packaging transformation. We're just packaging technologists, and that's our background, is around packaging technology and packaging development. So we understand what happens in this space. So we can actually be that link, if you like, between the issues that companies and members are having and sort of translate that back to a bureaucracy that APCO is a little bit, and certainly what government and department are. So when we think about mandates, they're coming. What are those design standards going to be? Have a good look at the sustainable packaging guidelines that exist online from an APCO point of view. Blair made the point earlier that there's a lot of international packaging that's being handled in Australia. Internally, we probably reckon that around 75% of all the plastic packaging in Australia comes from overseas in one form or another. So we can't be the tail wagging the dog. What's coming? How do we handle it? And then how do we understand what those design practices globally are? What is best practice? Who's doing that? And how do we influence people to move into that space? So we need to have that awareness. We need to have an understanding coming from a government point of view with regulation. There can't be exemptions. So hold that thought for a moment.
Odd that you mention exemptions, Chris. We had that here as another question that was put up here. So if you've got non-compliant material and sourcing suitable alternatives, but if there are materials that can't be replaced, what happens?
So what's that conversation look like? So again, we can't have exemptions because nothing changes. I've had people ring me up, when I started with APCO saying, the 2025 national packaging targets, can you kick them back to 2030, please? We need to work on them now. And the answer was, well, you knew about them in 2018 and you're ringing me in 2022. Why do I suspect that you'll ring me in 2028 and ask for the 2030 ones to be pushed out again? So no exemptions. But what's your roadmap? Why can't you make the change? What's the limitation? When do you think you could make the change? Are you lacking technology? Is it because of, again, I've spent some time working in pharmaceutical and consumer healthcare packaging, trying to get TGAs and then trying to line that up globally with various government authorities in terms of making change to medical packaging is impossible. Is it 26? Is it 28? Is it 2030? What's the roadmap? And then how do we hold to that? They become the better conversations to be having rather than saying, I can't do it, I'm not going to do it. Because I can't do it, I'm not going to do it isn't going to cut it when we get to this stage. So what's the roadmap look like? Let's talk about that. I think that's probably the sensible way to take this forward.
So why isn't there a forward roadmap saying if these are the products you're using, here are your alternatives?
So the question was,
So I might just repeat Nikki's question. So you're saying, where is the roadmap? If there's not any alternatives, what are they? How are we going to get to them? What does that map look like?
Well, sorry.
Give the woman a microphone.
Hi, my name's Nikki. My question is, why isn't there a forward roadmap for all of industry to be able to say, well, here are all of the substrates we are using. Here are the ones that absolutely have an alternative. So that we're all trying to recreate and reinvent the wheel. There must be, because I think most of our issue is around shelf life.
Mhm.
And everyone goes, oh, here's the substrate. Why don't you try it? And we're going, well, that's just bloody ridiculous. You must know, being the manufacturer of that, what the oxygen transference is, water molecule transference. Someone's got to give us some information.
Yep.
And it seems like here's the rules, here's what it's going to look like, and everyone, you're just going to have to work it out for yourself. And I'm getting frustrated by that.
sorry, Nikki, where are you from? What company are you working from?
I'm with a confectionery company.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Kingsway
you-
confectionery.
So you don't have that knowledge within your organization to sort of go back to your supplier and say, these are the types of questions I need to ask.
Well, no, we have, and we've been given substrates to test, and they've all been diabolically shit. So
Obviously, none of the converters in the room are the ones you've been talking to. Yeah, and I guess, yeah, it's a really interesting comment. I'd reflect back on those sustainable packaging guidelines that we have. Now, the problem we have, I guess, is they've been up and running since 2020. They are reflective of what we would see as best practice. And at that stage, that was European standard. So looking at what CFlex recommend from a flexible packaging point of view, what the Consumer Goods Forum might be doing with their golden design rules, et cetera, et cetera. And you can sort of see it all sort of overlaps a little bit with how those things work. So it is best practice in terms of what that looks like. And it's the challenge is to try and get away from those, getting into those polyolefin type materials, getting away from mixed material laminates is the opportunity. But as I said, if that compromises product integrity, then you need a better solution than just change and hope for the best, because that's not the right way forward. So I guess part of that is maybe in today, that's part of our opportunity when we get into the workshops, is to understand, where do I get that information from? And can people at APCO help with that? And we can. And that's part of the rationale behind having a packaging transformation team that Chris set up really only 12 months ago. So it's kind of a new thing to have packaging technologists working at the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, but here we are now. So we could talk about whether we should have been here before, but we're here now. And leveraging that knowledge base, I guess, or in that experience to help in make those decisions. But again, understanding the experience that we've had in the past as packaging techs understands that if you're changing food packaging around, it's going to take 12 to 24 months to make that work. What's the roadmap? I keep coming back. I don't think we should be too caught up on we have to be caught up on the 2026 timing for the regulation. But at the same time, what's the plan? How does that look? How is that progressing? How are you getting there? The conversations that we've had internally suggest there's an understanding that there needs to be transition for some of these materials. So what is your transition plan? And again, working through that in the next little bit would be very helpful.
Blair's
Take
got a
that on.
question. Hang on.
Sorry, just to add to that, to Ian's comment, it's quite often we can't find the final solution in one jump. So what I would encourage you is, if you can't find a one-off solution, take a step towards a better structure. Take one, if you've got 5 layers in your laminate, can you take one out and then work on that? And do it in a stepwise step, because quite often you cannot go, the packaging is there for a reason. It's there to protect the product, to deliver whatever you need. And it's been developed over time. So what can you do to reverse engineer it? And we came to these structures over time, most well before any of us. So potentially it will take time to reverse engineer to get a more sustainable structure.
I should firstly say I'm not in confectionery. but we all compete. And I imagine, I don't know who's in the room here, but most of us are not in the not-for-profit area, right? So
Yeah.
we've got shareholders, we've got expectations. And the challenge is, and my biggest query in all this is, who's going to share and who's going to be, because all of us going out to develop structures, like we've got packaging technologists, others have. J&P are one supplier, but there's lots of suppliers. How's it ever going to, if I get the solution, why would I share it? There's no incentive to, like we're all going in confectionery, every confectionery manufacturer is working on it, or their suppliers are getting pushed to work on it, but who pulls it all together? Is that the role of yourselves? Because otherwise we'll all fumble through it together and we'll never get to the targets.
Well, I think that gets back again to what do those design standards look like when we get there? And then what scope there is to actually have some flexibility around those. But again, it's within the flexible space, getting into those simplicity of structures is the way forward. So non-halogen based stuff, so no chlorines, please. No mixed material laminates, please, if we can. And then just understand what that could look like. And it does start to then narrow the field a little, but people will be chasing the right way forward. And I think that gets back.
Big factories with massive capital investment on lines that don't necessarily move the structures. That's what I'm saying. It's a challenge. I don't have a
Oh, yeah,
solution.
the huge
No.
challenge. Yeah.
No, I think we're acknowledging that it's a huge challenge. Yeah. And I think that's the understanding how we take that forward. Again, we had the pre-competitive warning at the start. So that is a challenge in terms of how do we bring this all together from a technology point of view. But part of the opportunity, I guess, is that we're in the room today. What does that look like? How does that break things open? Having a chat with some of the material manufacturers who are over here with us, understanding what that could be done. There are ways that we could, within the APCO community, if you like, we're looking at these, our working group stewardship committees, looking at specific programs and projects where people are starting to volunteer, not necessarily all that information, but at least being part of those types of programs going forward. So finding a way to do that is the way. I don't have the answer today either, Blair.
And that sort of leads into the next pre-prepared question and point that we brought up. So brand owners, the barriers and the challenges, like the investment by businesses to be sustainable. We're not even 100% sure what that looks like for every customer that we deal with at the moment. And the engagement of business executives, like if you have to do this, how engaged are they going to be? Again, Sandra's come out of FMCG, and I know Louis has some thoughts on this as well. If you would want to make a comment on what you've recognised from your previous work life.
Yeah, I think we've seen a real shift, particularly big companies with large shareholders. They're being measured. Everyone's putting out their sustainability reports, reporting on their delivery of the APCO of the national packaging targets is something that is measured and something they celebrate or say, yeah, we know it's not good enough, but we're working in that direction. So I think from a very big corporate Australia, there's a bit of a groundswell that's developing. Probably less so in, potentially smaller companies or industries with very, very low profit margins, where every cent makes a significant difference to your delivery. And there's still a perception that making packaging more sustainable means it will cost more. And so in some cases that's true, but not necessarily in all cases. So I think it's about trying to find the right solution for your business, but there's definitely an increase.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment regarding that as from a business point of view, there's also going to be an expectation of what costs are out there. And so as food standards drove various things to actually now become standard, and we have to do and now businesses work within those standards, but take their own collective, recipes and things like that. But there's still overall, you meet certain standards. as businesses, we've just got to understand, well, this is the next change. There's a whole heap of government regulations that are coming and putting imposts on all of us as business owners. And we're all asking those questions. Who shares those costs? How do we actually make sure that we're profitable? And so we'll, as businesses, we'll push back onto governments as much as we can. But when these get pushed out, as we have to do them, then that's what we do them. So it's about trying to if we get ahead of the curve, if we actually start being proactive as businesses and work on these solutions before they're mandated, then we should be able to be smart enough to come up with solutions that are cost effective and good business sense, and use these opportunities to actually drive engagement with our customer base as well. So there's some good examples at the moment of big companies that are going out there saying that they're using less packaging or less kilos, or they're using these nice new barriers and all these, and they're getting lots of airtime on TV. They're being held up and amongst the community as being leaders in all of our social sort of society, and they will get a marketing advantage. So rather than actually being at the end of this process, if we're at the front of this process, then we as a business, we can actually show that, and the community will reward us through that rather than being at the end. So these are things where we got to try and engage with the ownership of our businesses to see them to look at that it's an opportunity rather than as a threat, and how can we leverage it as a positive rather than as a negative.
The other one to probably throw under the table is looking at what an extended producer responsibility scheme might look like for packaging. We've seen those examples overseas. I'll bring a rigid PET bottle to the discussion, since it's completely outside of the scope of it's a good example though. Our friends at Coca-Cola have taken the green out of Sprite bottles globally. Aren't they wonderful people? They've done that from the goodness of their heart? No. So within Belgium, for example, there's an EPR scheme, and clear PET has a tax of 7 cents per kilogram. Tinted or pigmented PET has a cost of 44 cents per kilogram. So you can actually bring the horse to water a little bit here if we think about how that might look. I don't know how that's going to play. There have been good at EPR schemes. The UK introduced the 30% tax, if you like, and 30% recycled content, or you pay a tax, which is an appalling scheme. It just doesn't work because there's not available material. And that material that is a tax. That money goes directly into the tax office's revenue. It doesn't go to drive any of the revenues discussion that we were having earlier. So it's a tax. It's not helping anybody except raise revenue. And I was in the UK at the time. I met with the tax office and they patted me on the back as I walked out the door and said, the only people hated more than us are people who make plastic packaging. And we can tax you till your nose bleeds. So that was their mindset in the UK in 2019. And we have to avoid that as well. It can't be just a revenue raiser. But the idea of actually having an EPR scheme that drives a way of investment or a way of developing infrastructure might be a way to think about this. And again,
probably asking against my own interests here, but I just want to know, is there going to be a level playing field in all this for products that are brought in from overseas that are already packaged versus like all these poor Australian producers who are going to have to comply with these standards?
That's an excellent question, Anne, and I'll let Ian jump into the mic.
Thanks, Anne. Appreciate it. Well, the obvious answer is yes, but the question is how. And there's a number of things about that. If you actually then roll that into the next part of that, Chris mentioned there's three things that we're trying to do with the mandates, if you like. It's about design standards, getting that right. It's about recycled content or targets in general. So are we meeting those national packaging targets and recycled content? And then we keep talking about hazardous chemicals. I prefer we talked about chemicals of concern. Hazardous feels like it's already been registered, whereas chemicals of concern, we need to be aware of it as we move forward, but pedantic stuff. So Was it recycled content? Oh, no, products coming from overseas. So yeah, you're a distributor. You're bringing those products in. You're responsible. You're the brand owner. It says your name on the outside. So we've had that conversation and that's okay. It's the recycled content one that worries me because I've spoken to those people who bring in products from overseas and they've said, don't worry about it. Whatever your targets are, it's fine. I'll bring it in with the recycled content in it. It doesn't actually fix the problem here in Australia. So we've still got that material coming. We've still got to deal with it. And oh no, I know, right? So again, and the devil's in the detail for this, right? But having flagged this, I think it's important to understand that the only way this regulation is going to work is if it's enforced. And we've had, to be honest, the National Environment Protection Measure, the NEPM that exists, is state-based legislation which state governments could enforce if they wanted to, and they just haven't. So if I don't sign up to the National Packaging Covenant, register with APCO and do my action plan and show my way forward, I'm now subject to the NEPM. And effectively anything that turns up in waste or in the street or in landfill, in the waterways with my brand on it, I can be prosecuted under the NEPM. But no one is. Now we can talk about that another day about why not, but it's not happening. So if we're going to have regulation, it needs to be enforced. Does that mean then we have a border force type approach where we're inspecting containers that come into the port that look at raw materials coming in, the packaged materials coming in? You're a valued citizen who identifies this product on shelf and thinks it looks a bit suspect. You report it to the agency and it gets tested. We're talking about chemical testing of packaging. We need to have these types of facilities functioning and running to make this enforceable. It's on the agenda. We've got 2 years to see. Okay. But I think that's part of it though, right? Is how do we enforce this? No, because no, that's fair. Yeah, that's a pretty big budget to take that one. Hang on, we need to get some microphones to people.
Sorry, I've got one question. So we've only been a APCO member for a short period of time, and in that time, we've seen some changes to, the targets, and we've seen things like carbon black added in, which sort of brings about a little bit of confusion as to what we are working towards and what is going to be our focus and the main things that we need to achieve to meet the mandates. Do you foresee any changes, or what do you foresee coming with the mandation of some of the targets? And do you know if anything else is going to come on board that we potentially might need to work towards?
No, but yes, I mean, we understand that the sustainable package, I keep mentioning the sustainable packaging guidelines. And if you're an APCO member, anyway, even if you're not, you can jump online and see those. They're freely available to everybody. As I said, they're pretty good, sort of like a well benchmark foundation for what packaging design, a good packaging design looks like. Carbon black isn't really a new thing. We shouldn't be in carbon black, but we can. So it's, again, I think it comes back to some of the education piece, whether that's consumer or industry itself, what's right, what's wrong, and how do we help people get into that space a bit better and more clearly. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I don't want to stand up here today in front of everyone and say, this is how it's going to go. I'm a voice on that working group, but there's 10 other people. And then it goes in front of the state environment ministers and the federal environment minister to say, okay, and this is how it's going to go forward. So we can set them in a direction, but where they take it, we'll see. I guess the good news for me is that it's this direction, right? We're not going back behind us anymore. We're going this way. We go a little left, we go a little right. We'll see how that goes, but that's how it should look. But as I said, the foundation of the sustainable packaging guidelines is a really good starting point.
I just wanted to mention for the people who are online who may not have taken notice of the QR code, which Louis popped back up here. Don't know if you can see me pointing in the general direction. That will take you to the Mentimeter process where you can participate in sending your questions through. Hopefully,
If
we don't have any more questions, we might move on.
Yes, because we do have a time frame still. Sure, there's more than 2 questions, but that's okay. We'll go with 2 for the moment. What is next past 2025 and 2030? So that one's over for Ian to say, but I'll paraphrase him for the moment, which is, and until he gets up and gets ready, is that definitely past 2030, that's a long way away. And if any of us can see what's going to happen there, you know, how many people in 2018 had their 5-year plans completely brought undone. So, you know, saying where we're going to be beyond 2030 pretty much really, I'd say, is a joke. But beyond 2025, I think there is definitely a plan at the moment. So, Ian.
Yeah, well, I hope to be retired by 2030, so it's somebody else's problem. That'll be fine. But thinking about it, I think we've talked about how we can't be isolationist in Australia. We're receiving a lot of packaging coming in, and we need to be aware of that. So looking at what's happening overseas, you look at the PPWR, the packaging and packaging waste regulation coming out of Europe right now. They have targets in place for 2030, 35, 40, 45, and where they hope to get to. So again, reflecting on what those targets look like is probably not a bad place to go. And again, after we've finished here, please, we can send this stuff through if you like, Louis, because this is all publicly available information. I mean, a lot of it's 180 pages long and hard to discern, but we can find some summaries and start to think about what they see as being good practice going forward. It's not necessarily what we do because they have different infrastructure and different supply chains, as we talked about, but understanding where they're going is probably a reasonable starting point for that type of conversation. But you're right, trying to invent the future. Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah. Who in 2018, when we wrote the sustainable packaging guidelines, saw 4 years later we'd be in the middle of a COVID crisis. So who knows?
And how will non-compliant materials be detected and non-compliant companies forced to comply? Excellent question. Excellent question. Look, we've got packaging experts here, you know, would understand if you just brought this material in and had a border force, there's no way that they're going to tell what the difference is between certain plastics. So, yeah, Chris made the comment will there be a police group made up that looks at this at the border? Will there, Food Standards has the health department that actually looks at a lot of this and then enforces it at a state level. You know, are the state EPAs going to do something and have compliance groups that go around, which they already do in certain areas? So it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to think that EPAs could actually take that upon themselves. So look, what's happened with the food standards, I think, is a good understanding of how we could think this can move into the packaging standards and what it's actually done. Most of the people, in fact, I think everyone here has been involved in the food industry for the career. So there's lots of experience here in food standards. So I talked about food standards and compliance and regulation and all those things. Everyone here would say, yep, that's exactly what we do. No compliance, no issues, no nothing. So moving to it being packaging shouldn't be that different or difficult. Yes, it's going to be cost and it's a new step, but we've done it before in lots of different areas, in safety, in HR, in food standards, and all these things have happened. So doing in one more, in fact, we should start using the same sort of systems to actually then be able to actually manage it going forward. And that's where we're going to be in the future, I believe. So that's the 2 questions. Mark them as answered. If there's any others through the time, please. Again, we've got whiteboards, we've got moderators. At the end of the day, we've still got questions, answers later on as well. So, and they're beyond today, please, as well. So we're going into now, we've done the feedback with the workshop, finding solutions. So we've talked about the key answers, thinking through finding solutions. Roz.
Just indulge me for a second when we talk about how we're going to find the solutions. And I know a lot of people are already doing a lot of work in this area. We're working with customers in this area and film suppliers. But a lot of the time when people talk to me about finding a sustainable solution, it's a fragmented answer. Oh, I need to find something that is going to suit what the supermarkets are asking me to do or what is going to be compliant. But then they start talking about other areas of their business. So I've tried to encapsulate that into a few bullet points. In order to have a basis, you really need to know what the sustainable base of your brand is to start this project management of ensuring compliance for regulation. So very obvious, your business platform and your brand. Who are you? What are the products? What are you trying to sell? What are you trying to be? Regulation, what you have to do. So who are you? What you have to do? And then cost, what can you afford to do? Because we've already discussed, you saw, how many times did we see cost come up on the word clouds? Every time it was discussed. So we know there's going to be a cost. How are you going to fund it? What can you afford to do? And then your packing lines. What can your machinery do? What can it not do? We've had experience with people getting excited about some new technology that have come in, they've gone, beauty, 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 we want to try and do that. And then suddenly realizing that they have to make some major changes to their machinery in order to make it work. And that comes back to cost. And then customer expectations. So it's not just the consumer, what will they accept? What do they want? What do they expect? But then it's your direct customer, your retailers that you're working through. So you have to align all of these values into your base for your project plan, for your timeline, and then consequences. And if you don't do anything, what's going to happen? Is there going to be some sort of fine or regulation that's going to stop you? We don't know about that yet. That's been discussed a couple of times. So if we look at the sustainable base of your brand, what we're trying to do at J&P is then become the partner who is going to project manage you through this and help you with your timeline. And we're learning about all of this as well. We're learning about the options and the opportunities to get you there, because it's a little bit like the light at the end of the tunnel, you know. It's a train that's coming in our direction. So we need to know that we're going to jump on board and actually be part of that journey. So if we are the sustainability supplier of choice, then we need to say to you, what is the base? What's your sustainable base? Establish that with you and then work out what are the pathways. So at the moment, we're probably project managing and trying to implement timely compliance across the board. And to some customers, that may be all they want to do. I just want to be compliant with the guidelines, maybe looking at some recycled content. And that's as far as the breadth of their thinking can go, because that's where they see that they will meet regulation. But then we need to start to broaden that out and understand next steps. Now, curbside collection at the moment, if you're working in soft plastics, the only thing you really can use is paper. There's not a lot that is available for curbside collection at the moment. I know our friends in South Australia are working with compostable, but it's not nationwide. But who knows what it will be? So then do we need to keep that as a blue sky? What is your curbside collection next point? It may be standard plastics that are soon to be curbside collected. We don't know, but let's make sure that we have your initial timeline. What is your next timeline? And then we project plan and continue to manage with you what your timelines are to achieve the next sustainable goal. The sands are shifting. It's not a solid workplace for us to be able to be too rigid about what our decisions are, but we need to be sensible about what our decisions are and what we can achieve. So based on that, you're recycle ready. Everyone's familiar with this. Transitions of structures to compliant material. So we've got reviews of customers' portfolios. You saw my previous pie chart. A lot of work going on, not there yet. Need to create the timeline to get everybody there. As Ian has said and Chris Foley has said, you really need to have been looking at that by the time you've got to the end of 2025. Down gauging for compliant materials. If you want to try and reduce your volume, is that a possibility? A lot of people are already looking at it or have looked at it. Is it a possibility? Again, reviewing your structure, going back to the culprits that I mentioned earlier, can you do it? And then the recycled content for compliant material, which is starting to be available, and I know will be discussed in a little while when we start to talk about available films, because I'm sure you're all hearing from the supermarkets, What is the recycle content of your packaging product? So recycle ready is one area for solution that we're working with. Curbside collection, this is still this grey area because it's really only paper. Materials that are already suitable for council curbside collection does focus in the paper area, and I'm sure we're all aware of a fairly major chocolate bar brand that has been utilising that as a marketing strategy for the last however many months. Yes, that has been successful in that space. Is it successful everywhere else? And what are the recycle options for materials already as part of curbside collection, and where else can that go? So we need to keep that in our thinking. When we're looking at solution management, keep it in your thinking. And then there's compostable, which we are dealing with some, and in every one of these areas, we have key partners. And a lot of them are in the room today, and in compostables, we have some key partners who are working with us to look at key laminates and single web compostable materials that are home compostable and industrial compostable. And those materials are available now. Now, are they suitable for everybody's packaging line? Some yes, some no. All of these things have to be trialled. You need to look at the specification requirements to suit your product integrity, and then your product analysis for shelf life. But there's also certification that we are actively working with the Australian Bioplastics Association to say that some of these products, when they have the certification on them, are home compostable. Now, as I said before, it's not curbside collection nationwide. Who knows when it will be, when we're all allowed to put it in the green bin. Again, you've got to keep your options open for what the solutions are that suit you going forward. And in each of these cases, recycle ready, curbside collection and compostable, J&P have key partners that can work with you on your timeline to get you to where you want to be based on your sustainable base of your brand. This is interesting that it came up in the word clouds, the words education. What we're finding is that the key to success is solutions plus education. Success can be gauged on many levels. Did you get more customers as a result of moving to a sustainable product? Have you become compliant? Is that how you gauge success? Tick, yes, I've done it. I can say that we're ready to rock and roll. Whatever success looks like for you, the key to success includes consumer acceptance of the solution. If you change something and the consumer doesn't like it, and in the chat room I was in, there was a whole discussion about one particular customer who was trying to change something and it didn't get the consumer acceptance that they thought that it would. And a lot of that comes down to education and your marketing and how you sell it. But in this instance, it's also training everybody as to what bin to put the relevant piece of packaging in. And that is still an area that's being worked on. If the consumer doesn't understand the packaging disposal process for recycling, then a lot of this work, it's not quite for naught, but it will be something that we'll all look at it and go, well, that went well, didn't it? You know, so some of the feedback with the APCO to government is we're doing the work, who's educating the consumer as to what to do. So then it leads us into the whole life cycle, the circular economy of brand owners, retailers, packaging specialists and consumers need to all assume their part in the packaging circular economy to make this a success. So our solutions plus education will equal success so that we can make this work. So we're looking at raw materials, sustainable design. We talked about what we might need to do to change our packaging design. The production of the same, the distribution, are we doing that in the most sustainable way? The consumption of the product, which is where the customers in the room are utilising the product, and then reuse and repair, and then the collection and the waste disposal. In order for it to be a cycle, it has to be right across the board. So we're trying to do our part with the solution management to help you get to do your part. So then hopefully the cycle will continue to be a success throughout the Australian economy. To that point, I did mention that we have some key partners who are helping us, who have got some solutions within their portfolio. So I would like to invite Ian Hayes back up to the podium because the APCO do have some resources that you can access even if you're not a member. So there are some things that you can access to help you with this thinking and this understanding and this project management in order to get you further down that pathway.
I won't spend a lot of time here because we sort of talked about it during the day anyway. But these are the types of tools and resources that are available online through the APCO website for free, member, non-member, whatever else it might be. So thinking about problematic and unnecessary, I mean, I won't go through the whole lot, but these have been put together by the folks at APCO in conjunction with working groups trying to come up with this. Even if you just want to have a look at these and say, you could change this or move that around, give us some feedback on how these could be better. Anything like that would be really appreciated. The PFAS is a big one, obviously. So we're thinking about how that might look for organisations, certainly around their fibre-based. I don't want to flag anything too much, but PFAS in flexible films is going to come around because it's there. So smallish amounts, but it's around. So hold on to that thought. And it's unacceptable. As we go forward, it will be a chemical of concern. On the prep tool, of course, we've been using that and coming up with the ARL piece that goes with it. There's a number of projects that are underway and there's more coming. We don't have a lot of money as a non-profit member-based organisation, but we do have a little bit that we can assign to various projects and then looking for member partners to come on board and help us with those. So finding either in-kind or a bit of finance to help that work through. So again, working through these types of specific opportunities, but then also getting into some specific projects themselves. How would we increase the amount of RHDPE, for example, coming back as food grade? What are the roadblocks in that space? What are the opportunities in that space? How would we think about PET tray recycling and getting more of that going forward, et cetera, et cetera. So again, if any of those things sort of light up for you as something of interest, or you see something where I think we talked before, Blair's gone, but that idea of, we're all in competition, but finding technical programs where we can actually work consultatively would be helpful in that space. And so maybe we can provide that as a bit of an honest broker in that area to bring people together and work our way towards those types of solutions. Did I mention the SPGs? I don't know that I did. If I didn't, the sustainable packaging guidelines are available. They're up there. They're free. They're fantastic. They are considering all of those aspects, and they're, as I said, they're benchmarked against what's possible. What's best practice coming out of Europe, certainly. So again, the design for recovery is the classic waste hierarchy. Don't use packaging if you don't have to. Use the right amount when you do. Think about reuse. Think about, I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that's quite fundamental, but sometimes we forget as packaging technologists. So to go back and look at those is probably not a bad thing. And as I said, they are really good. And I didn't write them, so I can say that. They're very, very positive. And as a foundation piece going forward for what the mandates might look like and what good practice looks like, it's a pretty good place to start.
Bronwyn Walker is the Health, Safety, Environment and Quality and Compliance Manager. That's a mouthful in itself. From Innovia Films, who we source a lot of raw materials from, in particular for a customer sitting in the front row. We source a lot of raw materials through this company, and they have some very innovative things that Bronwyn will talk about. Thank you, Bronwyn.
Thank you. Thanks to Louis and J&P Flexos for having us here today. I will rely on my notes a little bit because I'm a little bit nervous, but that's okay. So just to give you a bit of background, I'm not a packaging specialist at all. My role is more about compliance, certification, management systems. So I'm talking to you more from, I suppose, a sustainability perspective than a packaging perspective. I've worked with Innovia for 11 years, so I hope I can represent what I need to here well for you today. So I'm going to take you, oh, wrong one, sorry, this one. So I'm just going to take a step back in the sustainability story first to talk to you a little bit about carbon footprint and how polymer films sit within that story. So first of all, talking about global warming potential. So in order to determine the global warming potential of something, we need to use kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per unit of comparison. And this is the closest way that we can measure what's best for the environment. A positive number indicates that the process will be contributing carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, which would be a bad thing. And a negative number indicates the process will take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which would be a good thing. Growing plants takes in carbon dioxide, but then burning, decaying or composting plant material gives out carbon dioxide. Oh, again, I did the wrong thing, sorry. All right, so as we know, food production can be quite highly carbon intensive. Cattle and sheep give off large amounts of methane, which is 30 times more powerful than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. Therefore, they have a high global warming potential. Then if we look at, say, strawberries or snow peas growing in the garden in summer, they will have a negative global warming potential. But then if we grow them in a hot house and then air freight them to where they need to be distributed from, then obviously that global warming potential becomes high. So maybe now I can speak your language. So effective, efficient packaging reduces food waste and lowers our overall carbon footprint. So we know the most important environmental consideration we are making when we're choosing a food packaging material is to make sure that it reduces food waste. So when we're looking at, say, the carbon associated with something, like food packaging material, 3 packs every week on these little biscuits will equal the same amount as this whole cheeseburger. When we look at flexible packaging, it's the most carbon efficient format. So if we were to package 1.7 kilos of waste in a kilo of glass, we would need 1.7 kilos, other way, a kilo of packaging to package 1.7 kilos of glass, but we would be able to package 56 kilos in 1 kilo of film packaging or flexible packaging.
Okay.
Now, if you ask about the global warming potential of film, so polypropylene is pretty well positioned. If we look at our Encore REF with PCR polymer in it, we will have a negative global warming potential. But then if we look at our Propofilm, which REF, which has virgin polypropylene, we're still very well positioned compared to all of the other kinds of flexible packaging in the market. So let's talk about advantages of recycled content polypropylene film. So polypropylene is recyclable. So we're giving a commitment to circular economy by using it. And when using some of the polymers, we can contribute to the national packaging targets with recycled content within them. All right, so our sustainable film options. At the moment, we've got 3 sustainable film options. So with content you can put into your film from, I suppose, as low as you want really, up to in the 90s within that product. So our post-consumer reclaim comes from, so it's a PCR film, polymer, which comes from low quality plastic destined for landfill. It's chemically recycled and we get the same quality and machine performance as fossil polypropylene. Our post-industrial reclaim, made from industrial waste, so plastic waste sorted, shredded, melted, extruded, and also food contact approved, which we don't always see with mechanically recycled products. And last option available at the moment is a bio-based content, so made from the oil from coniferous trees, byproduct of the paper industry, renewable source. It's not in competition with the food chain at all. And again, this one we get the same quality and machine performance as a fossil polypro. Now, in terms of all of these film options, we have certification from external bodies to make sure that we've got traceability through the supply chain, through ISCC for all 3 types, and then through the global recycling standard for the PIR polymers. I hope this is still giving you a nice overview, quick overview of the products we've got available at the moment. And yeah, if you've got any questions, please feel free to either direct them to me or follow up with Louis afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Anne and I'm here to help.
I've got to do something.
Oh,
Yeah, I got to flick over. Technology.
okay, now Louis changed my PowerPoint, so if I have to have a look up there later, that's why. I've been the technical manager at Impak Films for 10 years. Prior to that, I've worked in both the converting and the manufacturing industries for BOPP film. And prior to that, I worked in food manufacture in the cheese industry. So I've got a bit of a range of knowledge in terms of all the areas in food packaging. I thought I'd keep this short though and just run through a quick overview of Impak and what we do for the people that we work with. I'm happy to answer more specific questions later if anybody's got any, but Impak Films is a Melbourne-based film distribution company. It's privately owned by Andy Newman, who's over there, and Brian Christie, who quite a lot of people have said to me that they know Brian, which doesn't surprise me at all. We sell over 6,000 tonnes of material into Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia and the USA, and we have offices in the USA as well. We do sell a wide range of commodity films like BOPP, CPP and currently PET and nylon, but we pride ourselves on our technical strengths which cover a range of areas. Which one do I push? So we source specialty materials for niche food packaging applications. We design and build new technologies with our manufacturing partners. We don't actually make any of these films ourselves. We design films and laminate structures with our converter partners to fit the needs of food types or particular problems that are brought to us, while remaining within the bounds of the recycling models in the various countries in which we operate. We bring new and innovative products and manufacturing technologies to the market to increase the range of materials that our customers have to choose from. We source materials with PCR and PIR content to meet targets in Australia and the soon-to-be legislated targets in Europe. We ensure and manage the compliance of our materials with the requirements of the various food contact standards that we and our customers are required to operate within. And like today, we educate our customers and end users about the materials that we sell and the market environment in general, including recycling. We've got materials or laminates suitable for the packaging of all food types, with around 300 different materials in our portfolio, which include but are not limited to materials to replace non-compliant substrates. So we've got metallized films that can replace foil in terms of barrier, and they can also replace metallized PET. We've got some heat-resistant films that will replace PET to a point in some applications. We've got specialised materials with unique barrier properties, so co-extruded films, coated films, coated and barrier papers, and films for oven and microwave cooking. We've got materials that meet the recycle requirements. They're consistent with the recycle resin content targets that we have here. And we also have retortable films that are recyclable. That's everything. We work closely with companies such as J&P, adding our experience to theirs to ensure that the advice that you all receive is the best available in regards to your packaging needs. We support the products that we sell with regulatory documentation and technical service where it's required. So thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to meeting more of you before we go home tonight, and I hope you've all had a good time. Thank you.
So we've had some people talk a bit about it. I'll make an answer. There are no commercial PCR manufacturers here in Australia. There are some companies that are doing trials. There are a number of major companies that will bring in the PCR resin from overseas where the resin's made and then convert it to your materials that you want here in Australia if they manufacture the plastics here in Australia. So you sort of have to do the job. For my that only does half the. If you want to look at a closed circular economy, we want to be dealing with Australian waste rather than taking someone else's waste and bringing across to here and making them feel better. So we need to be getting our industries, our systems in place to actually be dealing with Australian waste rather than overseas waste. So yes, you can do it. And so there are some big companies out there that are actually flying the flag and saying, we're doing PCR, aren't we good? But at the moment, that is from overseas resin. But that can be done, and it is a solution, and it will give you your recycled content in your material. So it's not wrong, it's just whether it's right.
Sorry, the film that we make is made in Australia, but the PCR polymer is sourced from overseas. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
To build on that, is there a indicative timeline on when there will be PCR from Australia? If there's already people doing it, do we have a ETA? Does anybody know?
That's it. That's that past 2030 question. Correct.
No, I don't have a better answer than that. Remember, we talked about 75% of packaging is imported into Australia. So if you want to have 30% recycled content in Australia from Australian material and it's plastic packaging, we only make 25% locally. So it's a 2030 question. It doesn't mean we don't go for it. It doesn't mean we need to think about what that looks like, but there's a reality check here. How does that work? And what does that mean going forward? So it's a really good question. Of which, yeah, sorry, you got an answer to go for it. That'd be great.
You have another question? No, just
Further building with HDPE and their recycling plant and having that traceability system in place for Australia. So hats off to whoever gets there and how fast they get there.
And that comes back to the sort of opportunities we talked about. It's an opportunity for somebody out there to make some money, hopefully. Next question is, what can we access for PIR film and what percentage of PI content? So that goes back to we'll be equal here. So
For PIR film from Innovia, you can get polypropylene films, and percent PIR would be up to, I suppose, a maximum in the 90s at some point, just depending on coat polymers you'll need to use virgin resins. Yeah.
I suppose I've got a different answer to that. In terms of polypropylene, it depends where your reclaim material is coming from. Bronwyn's particularly talking about chemically recycled material, which you can add in at 90% and still get the same film coming out the other end. If your material is mechanically recycled, the amount that you can add back in is lower because it changes the structure and some of the values in the film. So the tensile strength, for example, the haze, it also does change the barrier of the film a little bit as well. And the film becomes more floppy. In terms of mechanical recycling, there's a limit, like paper, to how many times that you can recycle it before the chains become too short to actually be much use in the film altogether. From what we can bring in at this point in time, so it's BOPPs, it's CPPs, it's PETs, it's most materials. I don't think we can get nylon with PCR content yet, no. But that's about the only material at this point that doesn't have any PCR content. However, most of the materials that we're bringing in are mechanically recycled PCR content, only because there's a limited amount of chemically recycled material available. The one exception to that is the polyester, which we have good sources with chemically recycled content up to 90%. So basically, it's all of, I'm not sure whether most of you know, but a film can have anything from 1 to 11 layers, for example. Generally, you don't put reclaimed materials in the external layers, you will only put it in the core. So that's why the limit is up around 90%.
Thank you, Anne and Bronwyn there. So, well, we're up to 7 questions. Okay. When will your compostable film be certified? So the certification process is up to 26 weeks long. So we actually have a single layer compostable material that we're actually doing some work with that we expect the certification back within the next 3 to 4 weeks, because we've already gone through that process to actually get the single film. Now, the laminate material, and we've actually made some really good products from that laminate material where we've actually made good bags that have got great strength, hold their materials really well. We've actually got some samples sitting in the kitchen of our office with water, with jalapeno sauce, with tomato sauce, with aioli in it. So all different sort of materials. They've been there for over 3 months with no degradation of the material. We want carry your compostable bag home and it rains and it's all going to fall to pieces and my shopping is going to fall on the ground, which is what was happening 2-3 years ago with, in particular, with biodegradable materials. So compostables materials are very different. The technology of where we've got to is much better than where it was. And so that one, though, yes, we're still a little bit over 26 weeks from actually certifying. So we're about to actually make a fully compostable laminates using compostable adhesives, the 2 structures compostable, then we send it away. Now, for those who don't know, just quickly, the certification process involves burying your material in the ground. And 2 things have to happen. 1, it has to degrade. 2, you have to have some worms in there and you're not allowed to kill 90% or 90% of the worms. You can kill 10% of them, but you're not allowed to kill 90% of your worms.
And Australian worms are different to worms.
Australian worms, that's it. Yes, if they wear an akubra, they are different. So, and that's the Australian certification process. So it is rigorous from that point of view, but that's what we're going through. So we're actually going to have, at the end of this, a material that will be certified. And that allows you to put a logo on and a whole heap of other stuff. And going forward, when we get into mandated, it might actually mean something even more, that all materials that claim being compostable have to be certified. They don't have to at the moment, but that should be somewhere where we get to. And again, that's why regulations and mandating certain things is actually good, because it actually drops out the cowboys in the industry who just claim something when it's not that. And that can be not only compostable, that could be in other areas as well, PIR, PCR. You can get some bags from overseas that say they are, but how do you know that's what they really are? Because they haven't followed through a certifiable process to actually validate it. Trying to get off my hobby horse. So that's where we are with our compostable materials. What is the difference between home and compostable and industrial? Well, the test. In industrial, it's 52 weeks that you're allowed to give them to break down the material versus 26 weeks for home compostable. So if you were to put it in at home, it's got to break down in 6 months' time. If you just send it off to an industrial place, because the conditions might vary a lot more and temperatures and all that, they allow you 52 weeks. So that's the difference between those 2. I hope my friends from over the corner didn't load it up with compostable questions. Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Industrially compostable materials will not break down in landfill or in a compost heap. So there is a particular, you have to recycle them by the right method or they won't be.
Yeah. Yes, the temperature time process that they're tested at is different, yes, for that 52 weeks. Why is PET so hard to replace? There's some people here in the good question. Eric cries on the back. because, it does so many good things. It's from what a lot of people will say, but Anne's taken the microphone, so she has an answer.
I thought this would come to me. Okay, so we're all used to PET. We can put as much heat into it as we like because it doesn't start to melt till around 200, 210 degrees. We can put it in the oven and we can cook the bejesus out of it. We can use it for oxygen barrier because it had 100 oxygen in a 12 micron film. We can put it through old machinery and we won't have any problems with running it. It is hard to replace. So there are materials, there's a BOPP material that will replace PET to a point in terms of temperature resistance. So there's some materials which have temperature resistance in the seal layer. There are other materials that have temperature resistance all through the film. We can't replace the barrier, the 100 oxygen barrier, which you basically got for free with PET. We can't replace that without putting a coating on the film. And yeah, look, it's just one of those things. There are some avenues to continue using PET if you're using it as a lidding film. Ian might not like me for saying this, but if you're using a PET tray, there are some avenues in the short term where you can use it with a leave attached logo, but you've got to ask him for permission to do that. Yes, all questions should be directed to Ian personally. Joking, it's APCO. But look, it is, the market is what it is. If BOPP had the same temperature resistance as PET, it wouldn't be BOPP. So we have what we have to work with, and we have to find ways to work with what we do have.
Sorry, just a quick build. PVC is hard to replace too, and we've done it. So I kind of get it, and it's not easy. That's a fair call. And there's a progression away, and there's different reasons why we'd want to be out of things like PVC. But it thermoforms by breathing heavily on it. It goes into corners. It's great barrier, blah, blah, blah. And it works really well. But we've made that decision, not even in Australia. That's a global decision to do that. So there are ways and means to make that work, and how that, and it'll be the same for these other materials as we go on. We'll find technologies.
Yeah. The other thing to also be thinking about too is, so we'll use the pie example as for PET, and it's something that we're being active about. So there are people that use the PET to wrap around perforated, high temperature PET, wrap around their pie because they can take it frozen and put it in the oven, which is terrific. And that's what it is. And it's been done for a while. Well, why would you want to put plastic around a pie and then heat it up and then eat it afterwards? Or why do you have to do it at 180 degrees for 30 minutes? Why not do it at 150 degrees for 45 or 50 minutes? These are things that maybe, as going back to that education of why we're using the materials, what do we need to get out of them, and what are we asking our customers, our end consumer, to do with the packaging as well. So maybe we change how we use the packaging or what we want for the packaging, or the engineering of what this packaging is for as well. So that goes back to, the education and how do we think about what we want to use the packaging for. So it's, again, another way to actually be looking at it as to, well, maybe the PET is easy to replace if everyone actually said, take the plastic off your pie before you put it into the oven, as an example. Rather than leave it in there. And if you go into the market, into the freezer section, half the brands are saying that now, but they still wrap their products in PET. Do we have to be an APCO member to get future updates? If you're not a member, how can you know when latest updates come through?
It's not that expensive really to be an APCO member. And it's probably the best time if you're not a member to actually think about joining. It's probably what I'd say. So the way to get future updates in a timely way is the best way is to be a member. We can always have a chat about that. there are 30,000 companies who could be members of APCO, and there are 2,500 who are. There's a big gap there in terms of that level of engagement. Mandates are coming. We heard Chris speak. We're pretty well connected into what's happening in DQ. I think as a way forward, I think being a member of APCO is a pretty small investment. I'd say going forward anyway.
Or you can come and talk to us and we'll give you the updates.
You get the real updates from APCO.
Yes. But that's, yeah, I think we've all answered. It was 8 questions. So we've all, any questions from the floor? Or if everyone talked out, it is 4:30. It's getting late. I understand. I would want to move on from me as well. Okay, that's it. So thank you very much for participating in that. We will collect that together and put that as a bit of a slide for everyone to actually look at. We are here to help you find your sustainable solutions. That's what J&P is here to do. We're here to our business primarily is a printing, laminating, slitting business, but we are looking to the future about how to do that sustainably and what can we do there. So we're a flexible packaging company looking to help you in your sustainable solutions. We will ask about how you thought about this conference, and I will bring up a quick last voting thing on Menti for you to tell us how we've done and what we can do, because we will do something like this in the future. We will bring together our customers. It will be on something else. It could be on, in a year's time, there could be an important advancement in sustainability that we come back and say, what do we need to be doing? Because the legislation's come out and we've all gone, oh dear, or we all go, fantastic, whatever the case may be, but there's, rubber's hitting the road, or there could be something different. We could be talking about something else. But we've enjoyed our time engaging with everybody here and talking about an important subject. So thank you for your attendance, both online and here around the table. I really appreciate that everyone's actually talked to each other, talked about their solutions and their problems, and engaged and been open and honest about that. The J&P team will follow up with everybody and give and help you with your solutions. So that's part of what we will be doing. Thank you very much, everyone. If you want to keep doing that, that's fine. I really appreciate it. Give it a couple more minutes, but we can see the results there on the slide. We're above 4s for everything, so I take that as a positive experience, and we appreciate your input in that, because if you hadn't inputted, then it wouldn't have been positive. So thank you very much, everyone. Safe drives for those who are driving back to where you've come from. If you could stay, then we would really appreciate it, and great to catch up with you afterwards. But if you can't, we understand. Thank you very much, everyone.